Hello and welcome to this very special episode, a 9/11 memorial. Now, it's 15 years ago, and our guest today, the retired captain from Air Canada, Christopher Johnston, is here to share his side of the story. So a very, very special perspective. Thank you so much for joining us here
You're
today.
very welcome. Nice to be here.
It is, and I know we're talking about something that's not so nice, but we want to move forward from this. I don't want to go backwards and talk about the hate, the negativity. We know it's the worst ever occasion on North American soil. That's in fatalities. And you also mentioned financially?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but let's move from it. Now, I'm going to share my part. I remember September 11th clearly. I remember getting up, getting ready to go to work, and my dad was in the living room watching the news. And beautiful, crisp, clear, sunny day. And my dad was in shock. And he's like, "Did you see this?" And I kind of jokingly said, "Dad, I just woke up. How am I supposed to see this?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, come here." And my dad never calls me to watch the news. Like, never will say, "Come watch the news." So I knew something was up. And I was like, "No, that's fake, Dad." He goes, "No." So we sat, we watched it for 5 minutes. And I walked away to go get ready. And he yelled out one more time, "One more plane, one more plane." And that's all I can remember. Basically, we called it a day. Nobody went to work.
Yeah.
Everybody at work's like, "You know what? We're not working today. Go home." So we closed the bank that day. And I mean, when does a bank ever close? So, okay, that's my side of the story.
Well,
Where were you? Go from, say, the 10th.
On September 10th, I was flying back from Washington, D.C. to Vancouver.
That's the two main, okay.
And I flew back, and then I lived in Calgary. I went back to Calgary, woke up in the morning, and 9/11 happened. And I was in Calgary. And at first, I couldn't believe it. I was kind of shocked, like everybody else. I called my kids, like my son lived in New York. It was pretty amazing what was happening. And then, of course, the airways were shut down. I couldn't fly for the next 4 or 5 days. If I could keep on going,
Yeah, keep going.
when we actually started flying again, I flew the first airplane of Air Canada's from Vancouver back into New York, and we flew into JFK.
Now, how long did it take before we were flying planes
It was
back
about 5 days. 5 days the airspace was closed. I'm not sure exactly what it was. I had the first Vancouver flight back into New York, and it was like we landed JFK.
How was the feeling of the passengers on board? You recall that?
I recall it was somber because it was so new. And of course, everything was still smoking. And we got there, and it was a lot longer to get our pickup and get to the hotel and everything else. And we had like a 2-day layover that time because all the flights were so delayed. And when we finally left, after the layover, we bought a big, huge American flag. And my co-pilot and I, on a big pole, stuck it out the Airbus 319 window. The tower saw us actually and said, Air Canada, thanks for flying that American flag. Would you mind pulling over and stopping? We're going to send one of the airport crews out and take some pictures. And they sent out a couple of cars and they were taking pictures of us. And we found out afterwards it was on CNN that night. So here's a big American flag and the Air Canada plane, Air Canada, with the American flag hanging out of it. It was fantastic.
Well, what made you go and get a flag?
Well, I mean, we got to New York and we couldn't get too close to ground zero that layover. We could only get to about 4 blocks. And so even though it was 5 days later, there was like 4 inches of ash everywhere. The ruins we could see from 4 blocks away were still smoldering. 2 months later, it was still smoldering. So getting an American flag was just to show that Canada supports America and we support all the people that were harmed and hurt and everything else. And, just to show that it's not just America's problem. This is a problem for everybody. That's why we got the American flag.
So it wasn't like your bosses said, "Hey, Chris, go get a flag."
No, my bosses said just the opposite. When I got home, some of my bosses wanted to give me heck because, oh my goodness, the flag could have come off the stick and got into an engine, lose an engine, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, I had been in contact with the CEO of Air Canada, Robert Milton, and he sent me a personal letter after telling me on the phone how fantastic it was. A personal letter, fantastic. Thank you, Chris, for Air Canada. Thank you for Canada, blah, 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 everything else. And so then the supervisors that were so freaked out, they they fell off because the CEO was on my side 100%.
Well, see, now that tells me, and viewers watching, that, sometimes you don't have to go by the book. Your heart will tell you what to do, and sometimes it's the right thing to do. But that sentimental value that you created in that
Yes.
moment.
And actually, there was no possibility whatsoever. We have some pilots who don't even open the window, probably don't even know how it opens. And so this is the say of how
Well, good for you.
some of the supervisors are so crazy.
Good for you to think on your own there, and it's a heartfelt thing.
It was a heartfelt thing, believe me, it was.
Now, what do we have right here?
Well, this was a picture that was basically at the ramp in JFK. This is kind of before we actually left. This is just, I had an American flag draped out of my cockpit window. That's fine. And then the next year, the first anniversary at Washington Square Park, they had all United and American Airlines crew there, and we had a layover. So I spoke to my crew, which was off that day. Do you guys want to put our uniforms on and go down to Washington Square Park and partake in it? So we did. And it was kind of amazing because we actually met flight attendants and pilots who knew the pilots, including the plane that went into the Pentagon and all this. I met them, hugged them, gave some of the people, my regards and a kiss on the cheek, whatever, who had gone to the funerals of all these different people. So I mean, it was pretty bizarre. And this last one was just 2003 memorial, and I got to get right down into the pit. I had my uniform on, and I decided to go to the annual thing down at Ground Zero, and I went down where normally just family and relatives get to go down, into that area. And as I was going down, I just happened to meet Rudy Giuliani and talked to him for a bit and shook his hand, and he just said thanks as a pilot.
Now, I know you mentioned that in that picture is the United Airlines and American Airlines.
Yes.
Those were the actual companies whose planes were. Yeah. So we won't get into what happened.
But anybody could have gone to that memorial,
How was your initial reaction when you hear about this and you say you have family that lives in New York, a son that was living in New York?
Yeah.
How close?
Well, he was pretty far away. And actually, when I said he was living in New York, he lives in New York now. He has for the last 12 years. I'm not sure if he was already living there on that date. He might have still been in Toronto, but he lives there now. But I personally, like everybody here probably has lost someone in their life. So what struck me more is when I think about that day is that, so if you average it out to 3,000 people, and if you only know one person who passed away, your father, your grandfather, whatever, and you consider that one person, probably it hits at least 300 people around you, friends, relatives. So when you think of 3,000, it does affect a lot of people times at least 100 going out there. So it was hard, but I mean, New York has come back a long way.
But not even the directly affected. Think about the changes in all security, borders,
exactly.
People that don't even, like, as a Sikh, I remember people wearing turbans were considered Islamic and bad or Middle Eastern, and all these stereotypes were being thrown out there. But, I think that happening has brought into clarity that everybody's different.
Absolutely.
More knowledge has been come out that, okay, they're Sikh, they're Middle Eastern. Not saying any is better or worse than the other. We're more similar than we are different. I don't want to use that word differentiate, but I do.
No, like we are more similar because we're all human beings.
Absolutely.
9/11 though was a tough thing, and if I speed up fast, I was back in New York 3 weeks ago visiting my son with my wife, and we went to the 9/11 museum, which I hadn't gone to before. And we went up to the new Freedom Tower. It was a clear day again, and it was pretty amazing to see what they've done. But it's been 15 years, and so they have done a lot. And there's still, like, if you go to the museum, it hits you again because they go back to the day and the minute and the moment, and you will get tears in your eyes, 100%. I guarantee it.
We went
if you go there,
2005, November. We went there for a dance competition. No, I'm not going to share what dance competition it was, but
come on,
can't do it. You're going to look it up and see me, and precarious. You can't see it. But at that point, they had the 20-foot fences up, all blacked off still. Ground Zero was still Ground Zero. Nothing had been done to it. And when do you recall that changing?
'05, because I flew to New York for like 5 or 6 years. I was the #1 Vancouver pilot. They called me Captain America because all I did is fly to New York, fly to New York, fly to New York, layovers, and do all that stuff. And they did call me Captain America. Like, it was funny. But when did it change? It took a while. It seems to be more in the last 5 years that they finally opened it up. Like, initially, they rebuilt the subway underneath, and they did that kind of stuff. But I spent a lot of time right down at Ground Zero. Every time a layover, I always walked there because we stayed near there. So I always walked around, and it took a while for them to start taking the fences down and stuff. And now it's open. Like the ponds are there now, on the exact sites of the World Trade Center 1 and 2, and then the museum is a separate one, and the Freedom Tower is a totally separate building, and it's pretty spectacular.
Now, it's been 15 years.
Hmm.
How has New Yorkers, or how have New Yorkers responded to this? Do you still see people going by and down or fear or
No,
panic? No?
no, actually, New Yorkers seem to handle this amazingly. New York is a very diverse place. Like, if you think Canada's diverse, and we are, absolutely, go to New York. New York has people from everywhere in the world. Every language spoken is there. It's a very, very mixed culture, and they all came together after this. They all came together, and they all got together, and they rebuilt the place. And you don't hear them. Nobody whines or cries about it anymore. Like, people remember, especially the families,
Yeah.
right?
Now, you got to agree here. New York is a very, very special place. New York is a diverse place. I mean, as diverse as we think Canada is.
Yeah.
Now, if you haven't been to New York, how do I explain it? If you're downtown New York and you decide to look down one main street, and you can look 100 something blocks before the skyline is changing from buildings. It's like 100 and something one way, and then 150. So
Just
300
about.
blocks.
And you'll see a lot of
Yeah.
yellow cars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. So 300 blocks almost where
Yeah.
you see nothing in the skyline but high rises. Now, putting that into perspective, Mount Lehman here is about 303 blocks. It's 303rd Street.
Right,
Or
right.
200. Yeah. And then 200th Street in Langley, it takes us how long to get there? 20 minutes on the highway going 110 kilometers? Well, that whole distance would be high rises.
Well, New
Right?
York's amazing. New York is
That's
amazing. There's no doubt about
and
that.
that's still missing 200 blocks
Yeah.
of buildings, you guys. So that's the perspective of New York. It's
Like I said, you see people from all over the world, all different languages, all different cultures. So I love it. I think it's the greatest place in the world, actually.
and they say it's a city where you don't see the same person twice. I agree. There's no way. I mean,
Difficult.
it's insane.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
just to
big.
get on the subway, like I remember one story, I tried to get on really quickly, and I thought it was the last train going by, and everybody's trying to run onto it all, get on, get on. So running on to get on there, and then finally some guy looks at me and goes, "What's your hurry?" I'm like, "I got to catch the train." He goes, "Oh, there's another one coming in 2 minutes." It's like, really? He goes, "That'll fill up just as fast as this one." So you got to think, a full train just left, and within 2 minutes, there's going to be enough people there to fill the next train.
If it's rush hour and times like that, this is what happens, like on the train. But the trains there are fantastic. They move, everything goes. Every now and then you'll see a rat, like down like in the track. That's true. You do.
When did you finally start to notice that they're moving forward? There's
Well,
no
it started going away. Like, if you went into a bar or a deli or a place to eat, it wasn't talked about all the time. But I'd say for 2 months minimum, and maybe more, because everywhere you went, there was flowers, there was people. Have you seen, you know, Jose Hernandez? There was all kinds of stuff all over New York
reminders of it.
on the south side. Yeah, it was. It took. I guess it took a while. I would still say after a few months it was better.
Okay. So now one of my team members here brought up something earlier, and he said somebody entering high school right now, so a grade niner would be roughly maybe 14, 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know this existed. They were not born for this. And now for somebody like them, what is there now?
On the actual footprint of the Trade Center 1 and 2, it's all water, and all the names are written there, and the fountains come down for like forever. And then, of course, they have the new tower on top of that, is made to be 1,776 feet tall, which is when America was founded, right? So that's
Wow, it's
the height.
symbolic there. Hey, so
Yeah,
first the names
on
with the
purpose.
water
On
flowing,
purpose, yeah.
and that done there.
Yeah, and the building is fantastic, and the museum is fantastic. If you go to the museum, it's a whole day.
Why would you go back there on your layovers, on your downtime? What was drawing you back to New York over and over again?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of a different guy. Like, uh, first of all, I like America. So I'm a Canadian first, but I like America as a country. And I've been there a lot. So I've traveled all the way around. And it did kind of catch my eye that how just after 9/11, everybody was 100% on America's side, you know. And I did see, to me, I saw coming off of that a little faster than I would have liked. I mean, like they forgot about it. It was like, oh, going to high school. If they don't know about 9/11, I don't blame them. I would blame their parents. Like, I mean, that if they haven't heard of 9/11, then their parents haven't talked to them about what's going on in the world.
I think you guys can, you have your technology in your fingertips. You can look it up and figure it out. We decided not to talk about the actual events, and no matter how bad the turmoil, destruction, there's a way back. You can rebuild and build even better than what was there in the first place, but don't forget, right? I think move past it. As one of my heroes would say, an eye for an eye would make the whole world blind.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
so
You have to. I mean, you can't forget something like that because it changed the whole Western world economically, especially. And if I could just say personally about flying, as soon as this happened, it changed my whole job. Like I used to be able to take my kids with me up, like in the cockpit. We'd go on a flight. We'd go here, we'd go there, and they could. We used to fly past the World Trade Towers. I remember once going to New York. If I could tell you the story, I'm flying in. I'm retired now, so my supervisors won't mind. So we're flying in. We're lined up for a certain runway in LaGuardia, and it's a clear night, beautiful. And my daughter, 12-year-old daughter, Alana's with me, and she's sitting up in the cockpit. And I said, Alana, like, would you like to fly down and we'll fly around the Statue of Liberty and all that? And she said, well, can we, Dad? I said, I don't know. So I asked the first officer to ask the tower, and he said, I'm not going to ask. So I asked. I said, listen, this is Air Canada, so-and-so, we're on final for LaGuardia Airport, I think runway 22. Is there any chance we could zip over to the Washington Bridge, fly down the Hudson, do a circle around the Statue of Liberty, and then come back and land? Silence on the radio. And then said, Air Canada, turn right, go direct to the George Washington Bridge, descend to 3,000, fly down the Hudson River, let me know like when you want to come back. And so we did it. It was a clear night, and we went right by the trade towers, 1 and 2. And this was about a month before 9/11. So it just goes to show you. And then we turned around, and we like I told the pastors, and we came back and we landed. Like it took about 15 minutes. But so there's some things you actually can do if you want to do it. And so that was one of the things that would happen. Like I think it was literally 2 weeks before 9/11.
well, I'm going to share a very similar story because I actually started working at the bank that year, 2001, and my job before the bank was WestJet. And so my brother and I used to fly shotgun, jump seat, almost every other weekend. And we were jokingly saying, now imagine what would happen if you and I went and knocked on the pilot's door today. Not today. We said it about a month after it had happened.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of like, yeah, a month before, my brother and I had just gone to Calgary, and we were sitting jump seat. I had the whole headset, but the idea of me sitting in a jump seat now, yeah.
Well, I think it's coming back a little bit, but for 10 or 15 years, no, it was like that day you couldn't take anybody up there. And it was, so I'm just happy that I had, my son Anthony, daughter Kimberly, Alana, I had them up there, and my wife, and everybody I knew who wanted to. But after that, it was almost impossible.
Even security checks for myself.
Yeah.
Like I knew every single person. I had full back clearance. I could go on the runway, the tarmac, anything. Even going through, say, the commissionaires to the gate area, you'd always go the back way. But knowing these people, I still had to take my shoes off and go through the same procedure.
It went really far. Even the pilots.
Yeah.
Even the pilots.
Yeah,
We
that's
couldn't
true.
take a nail clipper.
You're right. Yeah.
So I was like, wait a minute, we're the pilots. We don't we're not going to crash the plane with a nail clipper. We actually have the controls, so we could take off and just crash. But oh no, we had to go on the side. You can't take that, Captain. It's a nail clipper. So I mean, they went a little bit crazy with the pilots,
Yeah.
because we didn't need to have a knife to sabotage the airplane. I guess they went crazy for a while, and it's coming back now a little bit, but it's still very tight security. Like, what does it cost all these countries? 100 billion, like huge amounts of money. Yeah, and it's slow,
Well,
and it used to be nice, and so this is
so here, before we end this off here, how do we move forward? How does Canada, America, decide that, these things happen? Let's not forget it, because when you forget it, history can repeat itself.
yeah.
So how do we move forward and say to the audience, like, it happened. Let's move forward. Let's grow from this. Hate, that's the word I don't like. And I still notice it. I still sense it. Will that be gone? Like,
I think it will be gone. Like, mostly, it doesn't make a difference how somebody hates somebody else's culture, or how they are or how they feel, but you can never go to the extreme, in my opinion, of flying airplanes into buildings and on purpose murdering people to get your point across. So hopefully we're coming around a little bit more, where we could talk to people, and try to get our grievances solved some other way.
I think the whole change and unity of humanity is this next generation. I notice it in my customers, the kids that come in here. They're a loving generation.
Yeah.
I see the bra burning hippies of the 60s,
Do
70s
you really?
coming again.
Oh my God, the
I'm not.
hippies are coming back.
They'll be back. Hey, what do you think I got going on here?
No, but we had real hippies. Yeah, no,
I
we
think
had
it'll be here.
Woodstock. We had great stuff.
I think that's this generation. I see Generation X is
maybe.
kind of like the implementation of change, but I think the next generation, it had enough. I think war will not solve any answers, and I think this next generation
War
will be
doesn't
that
solve
change.
any answers for sure, but unfortunately, you still have to be like prepared,
Ready to defend.
in case.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's like being a driver. You can be as careful as you want to be, but you don't know about the guy in the other car and what he's
Absolutely.
drank, or if
Yeah.
he hasn't. So you can be as safe, as precautionary as you can be, but somebody else, you don't have any control over them.
you have
It's
to
what
be.
they're going to be doing.
have to be.
So being prepared. Well,
So what do you think about that flag there, by the way?
you know what? Let's talk about that.
Because
That's an
somebody
amazing
gave
flag.
that to me. Basically, one of these times when I was down there, like, it might even been Rudy Giuliani. It was like, so like, Canada and the States have always been so close. At least they've always been the number one allies, in my opinion. And let's try and keep it together. And I like the flag, which is both.
I have to thank you for coming and sharing your stories today.
Are we still on?
We're on. We're on.
Great.
Now,
But Rudy Giuliani, he was a pretty cool cat. I didn't talk to him for long. I talked to him for like about 30 seconds only, which wasn't that long. And he just said, "Thank you for coming, Captain," and, blah, blah, blah. And that was on the second anniversary.
Is amazing.
Yeah.
Like some history, actually going out of your way to make a difference. Now, as we said, we didn't share any of the facts and figures of 9/11. And those of you that don't know them, more than welcome. Go and check it out. I don't say dwell on them. Know your history. But where would somebody find something like this? I know when I did my research, I didn't see newspaper articles. I was seeing like actual websites talking about their company or their business or what happened to them. Now, something like this, where would somebody find archives?
Well, this is basically Air Canada Pilots Association journal. So this is stuff that the pilots were interested in and actually put in their paper. But if you went to look up my name, you'd probably find some of these, because I've written lots of different articles on 9/11 for other papers also. This is just happened to be like when I flew, but I guess only because I was nobody flew into New York as much as me after 9/11 for 4 years. Like I said, they actually called me Captain America because that's all I did.
As it says right there, Captain Chris Johnston. So look him up. Yeah, you've got some other stuff on there.
I have stuff like in all different papers. Like I wrote different articles for different, but nothing spectacular. Just
I think personal perspective is better than some corporate perspective.
Absolutely.
And so for you coming down and sharing this with us, I can't
Yeah.
thank you enough. So once again, folks, thanks for tuning in to this memorial episode and looking at it differently. So
It's
been
15 years.
years.
It has.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been great.
Thank you, Mr.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Location and studio provided by Sip Chai Cafe, located in West Abbotsford, your locally owned and operated cafe.